This is the World Anti-Doping Agency's banned substances list. Taking a quick skim through, we can see steroids, erythropoietins, peptide hormones, growth factors, etc. If you're competing in a high-level competition like at the Olympics and you get caught with any of these in your system, then you're disqualified and you receive some punishment like being suspended from future events for up to a year or even more. In this video series, I'm going to be going through each section of this banned substances list and seeing what we can do as naturals to mimic the effects of these drugs as closely as possible naturally, ideally while staying in good health, using exercise, diet, recovery, supplementation, breathwork, lifestyle design, etc. Obviously, you're not going to get the extremely potent effects of exogenous drug use if you're staying natural, but we're going to see just how close we can get. So here we have the list of anabolic agents that are banned by WADA. First section is anabolic androgenic steroids, and you can see some of these names might be familiar. You've got various forms of like testosterone, precursors to testosterone, other types of androgens, DHT. Scrolling down, we've got things like trenbolone, nandrolone, lots of these steroids that act on the androgen receptor. You may have heard of some of these from like steroid users in the fitness community. Androgens are steroid hormones, which means they have 4 fused rings in their structure. They've got anabolic and androgenic effects, and they exert those effects by binding to the androgen receptor. And this basically leads to certain genes being activated or certain changes in the cell that result in muscle building or masculinization. In the context of sports, androgens are obviously useful because they increase muscle mass and fiber thickness, as well as the number of capillaries supplying blood to the muscle and the number of nuclei in the muscle cells. They make you stronger, they increase aggression and competitiveness, they improve glucose metabolism and body composition, so basically adding muscle and losing fat and using energy more efficiently. And the result of all of this is improved sport performance. We do produce androgens naturally in our body, but they can be taken exogenously, which is what a lot of top level athletes do because it enhances their performance. They can be taken in a number of ways, usually injected or swallowed or absorbed through the skin. Like I mentioned earlier, as a natural, you're not going to get the same like extreme benefits that taking steroids exogenously is going to give you. But this video in this series is about getting as close as possible naturally. And we can do this by increasing our own net androgen status. As explained by Megan from Team 3D Alpha, net androgen status is androgenic signaling minus anti-androgenic signaling from things like cortisol, prolactin, and estrogen. So what we need is high total androgens, high free androgens, high androgen receptor expression and sensitivity, and relatively low anti-androgens. But I will make the note that the body likes to be in a state of balance or homeostasis. So high androgens generally will also lead to high anti-androgens. It's not ideal to be in this state of like super androgenicity all the time. Those anti-androgens are there for a reason. As with many other things in the body, seasonal variation is good. The body doesn't like to stay the same year round. But getting into the main part of this video, I'll start by explaining the axis in the body that produces testosterone. So testosterone production is controlled by the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. The hypothalamus in the brain produces gonadotropin releasing hormone, and this hormone stimulates the pituitary gland in the brain to produce luteinizing hormone. That then enters the blood and goes down to the testes to stimulate the Leydig cells in the testes, and these are what actually produce most of the testosterone in your body. And I'll cover this axis in way more detail in a future video in this series. But just know that most of increasing testosterone is about making sure that this HPG axis is working properly, and also making sure that the testes themselves are healthy and working properly and they're not experiencing like damage or a load of oxidative stress or whatever. So let's get into how to actually increase your androgens. And if you're serious about optimizing your hormonal health, I have a more in-depth guide which is linked in the description, so check that out if this topic is something that's important to you. I'll start with sleep. Most of the systems in the body, including testosterone, operate on a 24-hour cycle called the circadian rhythm. And disruptions to the circadian rhythm through things like poor sleep can reduce testosterone, especially because testosterone is mostly made during sleep. So less sleep just means less time pumping out testosterone. If you don't sleep enough, that can also increase cortisol, at least in the afternoon and the early evening, and cortisol lowers your testosterone. And I'll speak more about cortisol later when I talk about stress. Sleep restriction can also play a part in metabolic problems like insulin resistance and obesity, and both of those things are bad for testosterone, since energy balance is very tightly involved with the body's reproductive system. If your energy balance is off in any way, then your body sees that it doesn't have like the proper resources, it's not in the right state to be reproducing. So this HPG axis, which is involved in testosterone reproduction, is disrupted. And I'll get into energy balance and metabolic health in more detail in a future video. Also, if you have sleep apnea, that's going to lower your testosterone and eventually could kill you. So if you're quite overweight, or you have a really big neck, or you snore a lot, definitely check for sleep apnea. So for the practical steps, how to improve your sleep. You should be waking up and going to sleep at the same time every day. You want to go outside in the morning and view the sunrise, and in the evening to view the sunset every day, to tell your brain kind of what time of day it is. Basically, you're getting your circadian rhythm in sync with the daylight cycle. You want to be outside for most of the day if you can, and if you're inside, don't blast your eyes with loads of bright blue light. Sit near a window. Your days should be bright and your nights should be dark. After sunset, you need to block blue light and only use dim, warm lights. Don't use screens like an hour before bed, and if you do, make absolutely sure that you're using blue light blocking glasses or apps. And I'll talk more about light in the next section. Eat your meals at about the same times every day and work out at the same time every day. And don't eat or work out within like 2 or 3 hours of bedtime, because that can mess up your sleep. All of this stuff is to get your body into a regular routine so it can properly align itself with the circadian rhythm, the 24-hour cycle. In terms of your sleep environment, your bedroom should be dark, like as dark as possible, cool and silent, so that nothing is going to disturb you and wake you up. Don't have caffeine after about 11:30 a.m. because it stays in your system for quite a long time and it can keep you awake. And lastly, I also find that a magnesium supplement a couple hours before bed helps me fall asleep and stay asleep easier. And coming from someone who's slept poorly his entire life, this has definitely helped me, which is great because I don't usually notice much difference from most of the supplements that I've tried taking. But magnesium is an exception. So I just mentioned that the body runs on a circadian rhythm. Our bodies stay synchronized to the daylight cycle using external cues or Zeitgebers, and the most important one is light. When the sun is at certain points in the sky, our eyes are receiving that light information and our body knows to do certain things at certain times in the day. So like when it's dark at night and we're not receiving much light, our brain produces melatonin to make us feel sleepy. And when it's bright during the day, we're like more alert, and certain other processes are going on in the body like more at certain times of day. That's obviously an extreme oversimplification and it's much deeper than that, but that's the gist of it. And the circadian rhythm is relevant because testosterone runs on a circadian time frame too. It's highest at about 8 a.m. and lowest at about 6 to 8 p.m. And this controlled, regular oscillation of testosterone levels is going to work best when our circadian rhythm is regular. For billions of years, our ancestors evolved to be outside most of the day, getting sunlight in their eyes and on their skin. These days, we spend most of our time indoors under harsh artificial blue light, which messes with our internal clock, our circadian rhythm, and 1,000 other things. I mentioned in the sleep section how bad messing with the circadian rhythm is, and it goes so much deeper than just sleep. Light is information for our body. As much as possible, we should give our body the light information that it's designed to receive, and that means sunlight and moonlight, and maybe firelight. And by the way, you can see for yourself the difference between artificial lighting and natural lighting using an app like Lux on your phone. The light level of a brightly lit indoor room is nowhere near as bright as this sky outside during the day. We are talking hundreds or thousands of times brighter outside compared to inside, even with bright lights on. We can't really tell that through our own vision, but when you use an app like this, it tells you like how many light units it's receiving. And similarly, when you're outside at night in a natural setting, the light is at most like 1 lux, even with a full moon. That's very dim. And inside with some lights on, it's at least a few times higher than that, like 4, 5, 6 lux, and up to like 50 lux if you've got like big overhead lights on. So you can see how this throws off your body's perception of the light environment and the time of day. Our body just responds to the light information that it's given. Anything outside the ideal light exposure of sunlight and moonlight is going to throw it off to some extent. Obviously, in the modern world, we spend a lot of time indoors, so you should absolutely spend as much time as you can outside, but when you're inside, I recommend using circadian-friendly lighting, like full-spectrum light bulbs during the day, because most LED lights have way more blue light than any other wavelength. but full spectrum light bulbs kind of mimic the sun's natural spectrum of wavelengths. And then after sunset, you can use blue light blocking light bulbs that don't have like any blue light coming off of them, and it's just like the longer wavelengths of like red light. We also need to talk about vitamin D. The body requires UVB light to make vitamin D. UVB only makes it through the atmosphere when the sun is above an angle of like 30 degrees in the sky. That means in the middle of the day. So if you don't go outside in the middle of the day and expose your skin to the sun, you're not making vitamin D and you're probably deficient. Right now it's October, and in the UK the sun barely creeps above 30 degrees right in the middle of the day. My only opportunity to make vitamin D is between about 11:20 AM and 2:30 PM. And in northern parts of the world like Northern Europe and Canada, it's literally impossible to make vitamin D in the winter because the sun just doesn't rise high enough in the sky, so UVB doesn't make it through the atmosphere. And by the time this video comes out, I won't be able to make vitamin D from the sun until the end of February because the sun just doesn't reach a high enough angle for UVB to enter. But luckily for us northerners, our bodies have evolved to produce lots of vitamin D from a small amount of UVB light thanks to our light skin, and we can store the vitamin D that we produce during the summer months in our liver and our body fat so that we can use it later in the winter. And unfortunately for darker skinned people, the pigmentation in their skin means that they don't receive as much UVB light and they make less vitamin D while they're in northern countries. So they're hit pretty hard with vitamin D deficiency in the winter because they just haven't been able to build up as much vitamin D in their stores during the summer months. I've been waffling on about vitamin D because vitamin D is important for testosterone. Vitamin D receptors are everywhere in the body, including the testes, so clearly we need it. You need to build up your vitamin D stores by getting sunlight during the summer, obviously without burning, and the other option is to supplement vitamin D or eat food that's got a lot of vitamin D in it, like the ones I'm going to list in the nutrition section. Other than the circadian rhythm and vitamin D, a lack of sunlight will also mess with the reproductive axis through alpha MSH and kisspeptin, and I'll discuss those in more detail in the video about peptide hormones and their releasing factors. But basically, when UVB sunlight hits your skin or your eyes, so that's midday sunlight, your body makes alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone or alpha MSH in the skin and the brain, and this alpha MSH stimulates luteinizing hormone secretion, and as we know, luteinizing hormone is what stimulates production of testosterone in the Leydig cells of the testes. So again, you need to get sunlight during the day, including the middle of the day, but obviously don't burn. So just a recap of light: get your circadian rhythm in check by sleeping at regular times and viewing the sunrise and the sunset. Get outside during the day as much as you can. Your days should be bright and your nights should be dark. You need to avoid too much blue light from indoor lighting and screens during the day, but especially at night. And then after sunset, you need to block blue light and only use very dim lights, if any at all. And candle light or firelight is the best. Now let's talk about nutrition. First, you need to be eating the right amount of calories, so like not too much and not too little. A lack of calories tells your body that it doesn't have enough energy or resources for reproduction right now because you're starving. So your sex hormone production goes down so that you can focus on finding food to survive instead of reproducing. Ironically, being obese often means that your body is resistant to insulin and leptin, which are signals of how much energy is available. So for an obese person, they've got plenty of energy, but their body actually thinks that they're starving, so it shuts down the reproductive axis, similar to someone who's actually starving. And for both obese people and very skinny people, getting to a healthier body fat percentage increases testosterone. Somewhere around like 8 to 17% or so is going to be good. Most people are holding on to a lot more body fat than they might think. But don't go crazy with extreme caloric restriction or bulking to get there, or you'll mess up your metabolism. It has to be gradual. You want to gradually build muscle and move towards a healthy level of body fat. You also need to have a sensible macronutrient split. Low-fat diets kill testosterone. You need plenty of fat in your diet, and preferably from things like eggs, fatty fish, olive oil, and red meat. Testosterone is made from cholesterol, so you don't need to shy away from it. But don't disregard it entirely though, because some people do need to pay attention to their cholesterol, especially if they've got heart problems. I don't suggest eating zero carbs, but there have been some studies showing improvements in testosterone when men eat a ketogenic keto diet or just no change. Could be the increased fat and cholesterol intake, improved body composition, or some other things. I'm not really for or against keto diets as of now. I think they can definitely work, at least short term for some people. I personally eat a pretty even macronutrient split. And in terms of protein, you need to get enough, but don't eat ridiculously high protein over like 3.4 grams per kilogram each day. So for an 80 kilo or 180 pound man, that would be like 270 grams of protein. Having an excessive amount like that lowers testosterone. Something like an even split of macros will be pretty much fine. Probably more carbs if you train a lot. And now one of my favorite sections of nutrition is micronutrients. This is non-negotiable. I almost guarantee that you watching this right now have at least one micronutrient deficiency. I'll put on the screen a helpful list of some excellent sources of each micronutrient. Try to memorize some of these, and you can get a blood test to see if you're lacking any of these. The ones that seem to be most important for testosterone are things like zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, boron, and selenium. But don't just focus on these ones. You need all of these nutrients listed. Choose one food source for each nutrient on the list and build your diet from there. And you'll notice that some sources keep coming up over and over, like beef liver, oysters, fish, eggs, dairy, sunflower seeds, spinach. The animal options tend to have higher bioavailability, so they're generally better. That just means that your body can absorb and use the nutrients better because of the form that they come in. And for the plant foods, they tend to need a bit more special preparation, like soaking grains, nuts and seeds, and cooking vegetables to reduce anti-nutrient content, and possibly eating them with fats like butter to improve the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins. I made a video a long time ago giving an example of a diet with all the micronutrients, but I'll make an updated one soon, but that video is a good start. There are some foods that seem to be especially good for like testosterone and fertility, so check out this list, including some of them. I'm sure guys will leave comments with more test boosting foods in the comment section as well. On the other side of things, you need to be avoiding junk food. Junk food will increase body fat. It can lead to metabolic problems like insulin resistance and diabetes. It increases inflammation, oxidative stress, digestive issues. All of those things are bad for testosterone. So as much as possible, like minimize junk food. Don't have it take up more than like 10% of your diet. Most of your diet should be micronutrient rich whole foods. In terms of digestive issues, you also need to look into gut health. Your gut microbiome needs to be properly balanced. You need a strong gut lining, good gut motility, stomach acid, digestive enzymes, bile production, etc. If you've got a lot of gas or bloating after eating, then your gut probably isn't handling that food very well. This is a problem that a lot of people overlook, and they think they can just work around it, or maybe they don't even realize, and they think that farting a lot and being bloated and constipated or having diarrhea all the time is normal. It's not, and if you experience these things, then you've got some work to do. Gut problems are at the root of a lot of issues, and fixing your gut is something that cannot be avoided. Like, you can do everything else perfect in this video, but if you've still got gut problems, your health and your testosterone are not going to be where they could be. And obviously, last point in nutrition is to stay hydrated. That means water and electrolytes. Exercise is another way to increase testosterone, at least in the short term, for about 30 minutes after exercise, and obviously long term, the improvements in body composition that result from exercise will improve your testosterone levels. But with exercise, it's important that you don't overdo it. You want to keep the sessions pretty short, making sure that you're recovering well, which is key, and don't overtrain. Most people are under-recovered rather than overtrained though. Excessive endurance training especially seems to lower testosterone, potentially because of the limitations in energy availability. And I have some experience with this myself. A couple years ago I trained endurance pretty hard for a few months, probably under-recovering, and my total testosterone dropped from 550 to 500 nanograms per deciliter. And I imagine it would be even worse if I trained even more and had worse sleep and didn't fuel correctly and so on. So the kind of exercise you should be doing, lifting heavy weights in like a 6 to 10 rep range to build strength and muscle. I have some workout programs that you can check out here if you need somewhere to start. High intensity interval training and especially sprinting. You can check out one of my conditioning videos if you want more guidance on that. And then some level of low intensity steady state cardio. You definitely don't want to overdo it, mostly just using it as a tool for recovery and fat loss and improving your aerobic base. Like, you're not training for a marathon. This could be like lots of walking or hiking, or you could do incline treadmill walking for like 30 minutes. And low intensity exercise can actually reduce cortisol levels. So that's kind of removing a bit of that block to testosterone. You also want to mostly be staying away from alcohol and drugs. Drinking alcohol reduces testosterone, it increases estrogen, and it increases prolactin. It can do this by messing with the HPG axis or by producing reactive oxygen species which damage the Leydig cells in the testes. And also, one of the main byproducts of the metabolism of alcohol, acetaldehyde, seems to powerfully inhibit testosterone production from the Leydig cells. And obviously none of these things are good for our goal of increasing androgen signaling. So avoid alcohol as much as possible. Other drugs like opioids can also impact the hypothalamus, potentially messing with gonadotropin releasing hormone and thus testosterone. Generally, I would stay away from all kinds of drugs, or at least don't use them regularly. You also need to lower inflammation. So chronic inflammation, which means like low level inflammation just constantly, that's pretty bad for just about everything in the body, including your hormones like testosterone. The cytokines that are released as part of the inflammatory process are known to disrupt the HPG axis and testosterone production in the testes. Excessive or chronic inflammation can also lead to oxidative stress, increased cortisol, and metabolic function. Basically, excessive inflammation is bad. In the short term, inflammation is necessary for dealing with problems like infection or wound healing or recovery after exercise, but it should be temporary, not constant and excessive. Hopefully you're realizing by now that pretty much every system in the body is interconnected. If you've got inflammation going on, that's going to affect your hormones, your gut, your psychology. If your light environment is off, that's going to affect your metabolic function, your sleep. If you've got nutrient deficiencies, then lots of processes in your body just aren't going to be able to take place as well as they should. All of health is interconnected, and you have to address all of these systems without neglecting any of them. And that probably feels overwhelming, but don't worry, we're going to get there. The information is out there, and my goal is to help you sort through it. So to lower inflammation, there are certain diet choices that you can make that have been shown to be anti-inflammatory. Things like omega-3s, avoiding excessive omega-6 fatty acids from things like seed oils. One seed oil that does seem to be beneficial though is black seed oil, which contains thymoquinone, which is a powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory molecule. Certain spices and herbs like turmeric, cinnamon, ginger, and garlic are also anti-inflammatory. Turmeric contains a molecule called curcumin, and you can supplement this curcumin directly. Probiotics or fermented foods also seem to be good for lowering inflammation through improving the gut microbiome. Red grapes or red wine contain resveratrol, which is another anti-inflammatory, and you can supplement resveratrol directly, but make sure you do your research first before supplementing this or any other supplement. And bee products like propolis also seem to be anti-inflammatory. Melatonin has anti-inflammatory effects. That's like the darkness hormone, so make sure you're maximizing darkness after sunset and your circadian rhythm and your sleep are on point. And then generally exercise, managing stress, fixing your gut, pretty much everything else that I've talked about in this video is just good practice for health in general, including lowering chronic inflammation. Stress is another thing like inflammation that should be short term and addressing a clear problem, like getting stressed before a fight or a tough workout or something. Stress and cortisol provides energy so that we can perform at our best in high stakes situations. And the problem is when it becomes prolonged and chronic stress. And this causes all kind of problems in the body and the mind, like heart problems, immune dysfunction, diabetes, etc. Cortisol is the main stress hormone in humans and it reduces testosterone. It can do this by messing with the HPG axis, by acting on the Leydig cells in the testes to reduce testosterone production, and it can disrupt your sleep and mess up your testosterone that way. So it's not good to have cortisol elevated all the time. So to manage stress and lower cortisol, you need to be sleeping well. Regular exercise is very good, obviously not overdoing it. Mindfulness and relaxation, meditation, breathwork, yoga, that kind of stuff is good for reducing stress. You can do like some yoga stretches after your workout, meditate for 5 minutes before bed, or listen to like a relaxing guided meditation. Social connection should also reduce stress unless you have some kind of social anxiety disorder. But even then, we're social creatures. We need connection with other people. So you should try and have a conversation with at least one person every day. Nature is obviously very helpful for stress relief. Make sure you get outside every day. I'd say at least 3 times a day. So once around sunrise, once in the middle of the day, and once at sunset. And go to a local park or any green space that's near to you. Avoid excessive fasting. One of the main reasons you feel so energetic when you're fasting is because you're running on stress hormones like cortisol to provide energy. That said, I do like the way that intermittent fasting makes me feel, and I feel like it's good for cognitive performance. And I do occasionally do longer fasts to give my digestive system a break. Excessive blue light can potentially increase cortisol, especially at night. Generally, just getting natural sunlight during the day and then maximizing darkness at night is best. And lastly, you can use some adaptogenic herbs as like short-term tools while you're getting the rest of these things in order. So these include things like ashwagandha or rhodiola rosea. A pretty hot topic recently is endocrine disruptors. So some components of plastic like BPA and phthalates are known endocrine disruptors that mess up fertility and sex hormones. So you want to be avoiding these endocrine disruptors and toxins. Replace plastics with alternative materials where you can. Check out my video about microplastics, and I'll also have a full guide to microplastics coming out soon on my website in like excruciating detail, so keep an eye out for that. There are endocrine disruptors in lots of places like tap water, fragrances, hygiene products, pesticides, and some natural products that are high in phytoestrogens like tea tree oil. Generally try to get natural products, so like natural fibers for your clothes, wooden or metal cooking utensils, drink and eat out of glass instead of plastic, beef tallow or certain oils for your skin, eggs for your hair, filter your tap water. Some of these sound crazy, but they do work. Obviously, most of these things involve some level of processing, but not to the same extent as like cheaply made, mass-produced plastic stuff. Just be mindful of what you're putting in or on your body and try to make sure it doesn't contain any endocrine disruptors. Don't obsess about it to the point of it taking over your life and making you paranoid. Just do what you can. This video is very long already. What I've talked about so far are the most important basics for getting your androgens in check. And if you want even more detail on things like mindset, supplements, balancing androgens with your other hormones like estrogen, prolactin, etc., check out my testosterone optimization guide linked in the description. Other than the steroid hormones that I've just talked about, there are some other anabolic agents on this list, like clenbuterol, which is a beta-2 agonist, so I'll cover that in the future beta-2 agonist video. There's also oscillodrostat, which inhibits cortisol synthesis, so the stress management part of this video is going to help with that. Ractopamine, which is another beta-adrenergic agonist, so I'll cover that in that video. Then we have selective androgen receptor modulators like Androgen, enobosarm, RAD140, and so on. And these selectively activate the androgen receptor in certain tissues, mostly in muscle or bone. So basically, they're much more targeted in their activation of the androgen receptor than regular non-tissue selective steroids are. There's also Zeranol, which is an estrogen receptor agonist that promotes growth in cattle. I'll speak about growth factors and growth hormone and stuff in future videos in this series. And then there's Zilpaterol, which is another beta-2 agonist. So we will get to that in a future video. Thank you for watching. Leave a comment below if you know any other tips for increasing your androgens. Check out my testosterone optimization guide and the microplastics guide, which will be out soon. Feel free to leave a super thanks if you'd like me to continue making videos like these, and I'll see you next time.